The morning it ended, I was standing in the driveway in my socks, holding a cardboard box full of things I didn't even want anymore. My husband, ex-husband, I was already learning to say it, was watching from the front door with his arms crossed, not sad, just waiting for me to leave so he could close the door and get on with whatever version of his life I wasn't in anymore. The box had a coffee mug in it, a blanket my grandmother had crocheted, a library book that was 2 weeks overdue. That was the sum of what I took from 4 years of marriage. 4 years. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over. I wasn't crying, exactly. I was doing that thing where your body needs to cry, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. So you just sit there with your hands on the wheel, looking at a stop sign like it owes you an explanation. His name was Preston. We met at a work conference in Nashville. I was a physical therapist, he was in commercial real estate, and he had this laugh that filled up the whole room. Big personality. The kind of man who made everything feel exciting just by being nearby. I was 27 when we got married. I thought I had done everything right. What I didn't know, or maybe what I refused to know, was that Preston's definition of right included a wife who stayed small, stayed grateful, stayed available for whatever he needed and invisible when he needed space. We tried to have children for 2 years. 2 years of ovulation kits and temperature charts, and doctors who looked at me with careful expressions and said things like unexplained, and we just need more time. Preston went to exactly one appointment with me. He sat in the waiting room the whole time. When I asked him, finally, to come in, to get tested, to be part of this together, he looked at me the way you look at someone who just said something embarrassing in public. "I've already had a child," he said. Just like that. Quiet, like he was correcting a minor misunderstanding. I found out the rest in stages. The way you always find out things you should have known sooner, in pieces, each one worse than the one before. He had a daughter from a relationship before me, 6 years old. He had been paying child support for years and never mentioned it. He had taken a paternity test when the mother pushed for it, and it came back positive, and he had just kept going with his life, as if that was a normal thing to tuck into a drawer. "It's not relevant to us," he told me. A child was not relevant. I'm still not sure what I was more hurt by, that he had hidden it, or that he didn't understand why hiding it was wrong. The divorce was fast. Preston had a lawyer. I had a lawyer. I found through my friend Simone, who works in family law, and pulled in a favor for me. The settlement was not what I deserved. I had quit a full-time position 2 years into the marriage to take a part-time consulting role because Preston's schedule required someone flexible, someone who could travel with him when needed, attend dinners, be present. I had built my life around his, and the agreement reflected none of that. I got $18,000 and whatever I could fit in my car. My lawyer told me I could push harder. I was scared. Preston had a way of making me feel like the difficult one in any disagreement, and even at the end, even leaving, I still felt the pull of that old fear. Don't make it worse. Don't be the problem. Just take what he offers and go. So I went. The apartment I found was on the 3rd floor of a building in East Nashville, in a neighborhood that was half charming and half falling apart, which matched how I felt exactly. The unit above mine was occupied by a man named, according to the mailbox, R. Calloway. I had been there about a week when I locked myself out for the first time. I was standing in the hallway in my work clothes, keys somewhere on the other side of a door that had just swung shut behind me, and I was doing a very controlled internal spiral when the door across the hall opened. The man who came out was maybe 10 years older than me, quiet-looking, brown hair going a little gray at the temples. He was carrying a gym bag and looked like he had somewhere to be, but he stopped when he saw my face. "Locksmith or landlord?" he said. "Sorry. Which one do you need?" "Oh!" I blinked. "Landlord, I think. If he answers, he doesn't. Try the management office on Elliston. They have a spare. He gave me the address, held the elevator for me even though he was clearly going to the gym, and said nothing else. His name, I found out from our building manager the next week, was Reed. Reed kept mostly to himself. I would see him sometimes in the parking lot, or waiting for the elevator, or once at the coffee shop 2 streets over where we acknowledged each other with the specific nod of people who know each other's faces, but not yet each other's names. He had a rescue dog, a big, gentle lab mix named something I couldn't make out when he called her in the parking lot. The dog seemed to like him very much, which I always think says something about a person. I was not looking for anything. I want to be clear about that. I was barely functional for the first few months. I was grieving, though no one called it that. You don't get a casserole when a marriage ends. You get well-meaning suggestions to get back out there from people who have never had to dismantle a life they built with someone else. My mother called every Sunday. We talked about her garden and my niece's soccer games and carefully around the thing that had happened. She knew I was not okay. She didn't push. That was her version of love, and I was grateful for it. I went back to full-time PT work. I started running again, which I hadn't done since college. I made a ritual of Saturday mornings, farmer's market on 5th, coffee, back to the apartment to read for the rest of the morning, small life, deliberate. It was at the farmer's market, actually, on a Saturday in March, that I ran into Reed again. He was standing at the end of the herb table looking at bundles of rosemary with the expression of a man who has been asked to make a decision he is not equipped to make. "Rosemary chicken," I said, without really meaning to say it out loud. He looked up. "That's why people buy rosemary," I said. "Usually, rosemary chicken or bread." "I don't cook much," he said. "The rosemary is still good. You can put it in a jar with water and it'll last a few weeks on the counter." He bought the rosemary. We walked toward the coffee cart at the same pace, and at some point it became clear we were both getting coffee, and then it was clear we were going to stand there together, and we did. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. The neighborhood, the construction on Charlotte, whether the coffee place on Gallatin was better than the one on Woodland. He didn't ask about me. I mean that in the good way. He didn't ask what I did or where I was from or why I had moved to the building. He just talked to me like I was a person he was already comfortable with, and I realized afterward that I had not felt that in a very long time. I got home and put my rosemary in a glass by the window and stood there looking at it for a minute. Preston used to critique my groceries, not meanly, just observationally. "You got the expensive olive oil again. We have cereal." Small corrections that added up to a constant low hum of being monitored. The rosemary was just mine. Over the next couple of months, Reed and I became something that didn't have a clean name. Not friends exactly, not yet. Neighbors who talked. He fixed the bracket on my towel bar when he heard me curse about it through the wall. Knocked on my door, toolkit in hand, very matter of fact. I brought him soup once when I made too much and didn't want to feel like a person eating soup alone at 9 p.m. We watched a thunderstorm from the covered end of the parking lot one evening because neither of us had anywhere else to be. I didn't ask him any questions about himself. Partly because I sensed he wasn't someone who answered questions easily, and partly because I had spent 4 years with a man who talked constantly about himself, and I realized, deeply relieved to be around someone quiet. What I knew, he worked from home mostly. He had a sister in Portland. He had served. I gathered this from a flag folded in a shadow box in his hallway, visible once when he left the door open, and he did not bring it up. He ran at 5 a.m. The dog's name was May. What I didn't know was everything else. The thing about Preston, and I need to say this because it matters for what happened later, is that he didn't disappear after the divorce. Men like Preston don't disappear. They orbit. He texted occasionally, things that sounded friendly but weren't. updates about things that weren't my business anymore, delivered in a tone that made clear he still considered me his business. When I didn't respond, he showed up. Once at the coffee shop, once outside my building, said he was in the neighborhood, which was not a neighborhood he would ever have a reason to be in. I told my building manager. I told Simone. I started checking the parking lot before I went to my car at night. I hadn't told Reed any of this until the evening in June when I came home to find Preston standing in the lobby. He had talked his way in, charmed someone, probably the way he always could, and he was standing there with his jacket over his arm looking like he owned the place. And when he saw me, his face did something that I cannot fully describe except to say it was not happy to see me, exactly, but satisfied, like he'd been waiting to see what I'd do. "I just want to talk," he said. I was trying to calculate whether to go back outside and call someone when the elevator opened and Reed stepped out. He looked at Preston. He looked at me. Some kind of read happened that I was not part of. "Hey," he said to me. "Normal. You eat yet?" "No," I said. "Come up. I'd got leftover chili." He said it so evenly that for a second I thought maybe I was misreading the whole situation. But he looked at Preston once more, briefly, and held the elevator door open, and I got in. Preston didn't follow. Upstairs, I sat at Reed's kitchen counter and ate chili I could barely taste, and tried to stop shaking. May put her head on my knee and stayed there. "You should document that," Reed said. "Every time he shows up. Date, time, what he said." "I know," I said. I stopped. "How did you know that wasn't just someone I knew?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "You checked the exits," he said. "When you saw him. You did it fast, but you did it." I didn't know what to say to that. "You were in the military," I said instead. 8 years, he said. "Army. And after that, private security consulting." Which is not as dramatic as it sounds. It was, I would find out later, significantly more dramatic than it sounded. That night was the first time we really talked, not just neighbor talk. I told him about Preston, the marriage, the hidden child, the way the divorce had gone, the settlement I shouldn't have taken. He listened without interrupting. He asked 2 questions, both practical. He did not tell me I should have done anything differently. He said, "You're not in that anymore." Simple as that. I walked back to my apartment at midnight and stood in my kitchen for a long time. Something had shifted. I wasn't sure yet what to do with it. I started to fall for Reed the way you fall for someone when you're not trying to, slowly, and then all at once, and then you look back and realize you were already there weeks ago. It was the way he moved through the world. Carefully. Deliberately. He was not trying to be impressive. He just was, and he seemed not to know it or need anyone to confirm it. By August, we had stopped being just neighbors, and by September, I was late. I sat with that word for 3 days before I bought a test, sat with the strange arithmetic of it, the 2 years with Preston, the doctors, the careful charts, and now this, now here, now when nothing was certain. The test was positive. I took 4 more, all positive. I sat on the bathroom floor for an hour. May scratched at the door and Reed called through it, "You okay?" "I need a minute," I said. "Okay," he said, and he waited. I told him that evening. He was standing at the stove, and I just said it, "I'm pregnant." And he turned around and looked at me for a long moment with an expression I couldn't read, and then he said, very quietly, "Okay." Not like an obligation, like something was settling into place. "I want to do this," I said. "I'm not asking you to." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The first ultrasound was at 8 weeks. The technician moved the wand and then got very still in a way that made me hold my breath, and then she said, "There are 2. 2. Reed's hand tightened on mine. 2 heartbeats. 2 small flickers on a screen. I cried in the parking lot. Not sad crying, just too much all at once, the good kind of too much. We moved into a house in December, a rental, nothing fancy, 3 bedrooms in Germantown, near the park, with a porch that got afternoon light and a yard May could run in. We spent Christmas assembling furniture and arguing mildly about where the couch should go and eating takeout Thai on the floor because the table wasn't built yet. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. Reed, it turned out, was not what I thought he was. I mean that in the kindest possible way. The private security consulting was real, but the scope of it, the clients, the work, the infrastructure he had built over 12 years was something I had not understood. He advised corporate executives on security vulnerabilities. He had contracts with 3 different federal agencies. He had more money than anyone I had ever known, and he mentioned it the way other people mention their commute. "You could have told me," I said when the full picture had emerged over several months. "You didn't ask," he said. "I also didn't ask your blood type." "Be positive," he said, seemed relevant now. I laughed. He smiled. He had a smile that he kept in reserve, only brought it out when something actually warranted it, and every time I saw it I felt like I had won something. Preston found out through mutual acquaintances. I'm not sure exactly when, or exactly what the chain was, but I know he found out because Simone texted me one morning in March. "He's asking around about your new person. Just so you know." I was 31 weeks pregnant. I had 2 babies pressing on my ribs simultaneously, and I was not remotely interested in whatever Preston was manufacturing in his head. 2 weeks later, he called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that started civil and ended strange. Something about making sure I was okay. Something about how things didn't have to be like this. Reed listened to it with me and said nothing for a moment, and then said, "I'll handle it." I started to ask what that meant. "Not anything bad," he said. "Just, I know some people. Let me make some calls." I didn't ask more questions. I trusted him. That was new for me, trusting someone's judgment without needing to see the full plan. And I was aware that it was new, and I did it anyway. What happened over the next few weeks, I only learned partially and gradually. Reed had a contact, someone he'd worked with in federal security for years, who had, it turned out, been looking into Preston's real estate business for unrelated reasons. The looking into had turned up some things, nothing violent, but not clean either. Some financing structures that weren't quite legal, a property deal in Memphis that had involved misleading a business partner. Reed knew this. He had known it for a while. He had not told me because he hadn't wanted me to feel like he was investigating my past. But when Preston's behavior started escalating, he made a call. Preston received a letter from a federal attorney's office. Not an indictment, just an inquiry. The kind that said, quietly, "We know what you've been doing, and someone is watching now." The calls stopped. The showing up stopped. I found out later, through Simone, that Preston had hired his own attorney and was spending a great deal of money on something he had been very confident, until recently, would never catch up to him. I didn't feel triumphant about it. I felt tired and relieved and a little bit sad in the way you're sometimes sad when something that took up so much of your energy is finally, simply, done. The babies came 6 weeks after that. I won't tell you it was easy. 37 weeks, an emergency C-section after my blood pressure spiked at the 11th hour, a recovery room that smelled like antiseptic, and where Reed held both of my hands for 2 hours straight without saying much, just there. A boy and a girl. We named them together. Took us 4 days because we took it seriously. The boy is named James, Reed's grandfather's name. The girl is named Nell, a name I had loved since I was a child and had never told anyone, and when I said it out loud in the hospital room, Reed said yes immediately, no deliberation, just yes. James and Nell. My mother drove down from Knoxville and cried for 45 minutes, and then made herself very useful and stayed for 3 weeks. She and Reed developed a mutual respect that expressed itself primarily through her teaching him how to make her biscuit recipe and him listening to her very long stories about my childhood without ever checking his phone. One evening, about 2 months after the twins were born, I was sitting on the porch with James asleep on my chest and May at my feet, and the evening light doing something beautiful to the magnolia tree in the front yard. Reed came out with 2 mugs of tea and sat beside me. "I keep waiting for it to feel fragile," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "It's not," he said. I looked at him. "Some things aren't," he said, "even when they feel like they should be." I believed him. That was the part that surprised me most. Looking back, not what had happened, not the whole impossible arc of it, but the believing. I had been so careful for so long about what I let myself count on, and here I was, counting. James made a small sound in his sleep. The dog's tail thumped once against the porch boards. Reed reached over and tucked the blanket corner back around James's foot, the way he always did, automatic and sure, and I thought, this is what it looks like when someone stays. I had thought I knew what that looked like before. I didn't. I know now. I used to think that what happened to me was mostly luck. Wrong place, wrong person, wrong years, and then somehow right place, right person, right time. But the longer I sit with it, the less I believe luck had much to do with it. Preston didn't lose because the universe decided to balance some scale. He lost because of the specific choices he made, stacked up over years, and the specific choices I finally made when I stopped being afraid of him. Cause and effect. Not magic, not fate, just the slow arithmetic of how people treat other people and what that eventually costs them. What I know now is that I stayed too long in something that was making me smaller because I had confused loyalty with endurance. I thought staying, tolerating, adjusting. I thought that was the honorable thing. But there's nothing honorable about shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's need for control. Real integrity, the kind that actually holds up, means knowing when something is wrong and having the courage to name it. Even when you're scared, even when the person across from you is very good at making you feel like the problem. I was not the problem. It took me longer than it should have to understand that. 2 years of fertility appointments Preston wouldn't attend, 4 years of grocery corrections and quiet monitoring, and a settlement I accepted because I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. That's what prolonged dishonesty does to a person. It doesn't break you all at once. It just slowly convinces you that your instincts are wrong. Reed never tried to fix me. That's the thing I want to say most clearly. He didn't rescue me in the way the word usually implies, swooping in, taking over, making himself the center of the story. He just paid attention. He noticed when I checked the exits. He handed me soup and didn't make it mean anything more than soup. He waited outside a bathroom door without pushing. That kind of intelligence. The kind that reads a situation and responds to what's actually there rather than what would be convenient. That's not something you stumble into. It comes from years of watching, learning, caring enough to look carefully at the world. And I had to meet him halfway. I had to decide, consciously, to trust someone again. After trusting had cost me so much. That decision was mine. It was uncomfortable, and it was deliberate, and it was, I think, the bravest thing I did through any of it, braver than leaving even, because leaving was survival. Trusting again was a choice. James and Nell are 8 months old now. They have Reed's calm and what my mother calls my stubbornness, which she means as a compliment. I watched them figure out the world, the determined way James works at a problem, the way Nell watches everything first before she commits. And I think about what I want them to know someday. Not the story exactly, but the shape of it. That doing right by people matters, even when no one is watching. that paying attention is a form of love, that the willingness to keep going when everything feels uncertain, that's not something you're born with, it's something you build, one hard day at a time. I know that now. I didn't always. But I know it now, and I'm keeping it.